Welcome to our Free Speech Zone, where we do a deep dive into trauma and reintegration. This is Combat Citizen. Welcome back to the Combat Citizen Trauma and Reintegration Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Stanton, and we're going to do a deep dive into your trauma and reintegration. Well, we've had a good couple of episodes. We've done some different things. So I just wanted to get back to get back to a different kind of episode with Joy, or an episode with Joy again. So, but first I wanted to thank our sponsors, BattleBox. They have a secure carrying case, actually fits a phone. So just let you know, I just wanted to say thank you for them. And also thank you for the listeners. Thank you for listening, and thank you for liking and subscribing and also sharing. So the only way we can get this out there is by you sharing it. So thank you for that. Today's episode, wanted to bring Joy back on and continue with the job search roadmap. So welcome back, Joy.
Thank you. The train is going to accompany us, I guess.
So we don't hear a train, but I'm sure you do. So
as you go through town, even in the middle of the night, they like to lean on the horn.
Oh, yeah, that's around our place too, is at like midnight, 1 o'clock, something like that. It's amazing. It's amazing. I can't imagine the people that are actually living right next to the train. Thankfully, I don't. But
I had a neighbor years ago who bought a recording of a train, and he was a traveling salesman. He thought it was quite funny to drive through towns in the middle of the night where there were no trains anywhere near and blast that recording out and watch the lights turn on.
That's awesome. Okay. That's creative, though. I'm curious how people would react. So I'm going to play a train when I'm driving through town. Wow.
On the road.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. Wow. Okay. Well, I mean, people do all sorts of things. So that's a new one. So I want to kind of do a recap of the job search roadmap for those of you that are actually following through with the episodes. So there's the website rebootcamp.us, and then it's / job search roadmap. So there's a section on there on the top of the page. There's there's 4 sections. So there's straight stuff, job search roadmap, testimonials, and contact us. It's the job search roadmap, which we're on. So on there, you go through, one is create your master file. That was the first episode. The next would be the build your network. And then we talked about create your job search management file. And then now we're going to be talking about to create a custom resume for each opportunity. So as we've done every single episode, I'm just going to mention each of the sections, and then Joy, you could just chime in and just give us some more details of those. So
sure.
All right. So the first part of that, create a custom resume. I can't even speak today. That's awesome. Anyways, gonna slow the speech down a little, and then maybe I can actually get the words out of my mouth. All right. So first one is for those of you that are not reading the website, it says set up agents in usajobs.gov, monster.com, and dice.com that will notify you when the type of opening you specify is listed on the site. So, as always, Joy, you have the floor.
All right. And of course, when you do this kind of a thing, you have to be aware of the keyword search. If you enter anything that confuses them, you're going to get some ugly results. It's like anything with data processing, garbage in, garbage out. So you take a lot of time and thought to putting into what you're putting into your agent here. And you'll get best results if you if you work at that. I've added something since you got the copy, and that's if you still have an active clearance, set up an agent on clearancejobs.com.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, this is a place where if you have a clearance, you have an edge over anybody else.
Right. That's
for military people. This is one of the best places to go.
well, USA Jobs is what you're saying?
No, clearancejobs.com.
Oh, clearancejobs.com. Okay.
And that actually, I think, spun off from DICE years ago. It had a different name at the time, but then it just took off and became as big as DICE, I think, for people with clearances.
Huh, that's new. I haven't heard that one yet. Hey. So what do you think about the difference between the USA Jobs and the Monster and the Dice.com?
Of course, USA Jobs. If you've been in the service for a while and you're trying to keep your federal employment going to maximize benefits, USA Jobs is the one you want to focus your attention on because that's where the government jobs are going to be. If you're just thinking you want to move away from that and get into the civilian world, then Monster and Dice are more likely. Indeed is another one that's come up. I first wrote this, and a lot of people use Indeed.
I've used Indeed. Yeah, that's not too bad of a website.
I have a geologist I'm helping, and Indeed seems to be working well for him.
Yeah, I got one job off of Indeed.com, and I just didn't need to go back to it, but it seemed like a good enough place to go. Okay, so next section on here is, I like this one actually, troll the internet for job postings.
Now, this is like a treasure hunt. This whole section is kind of, if you were thinking in terms of a restaurant, it has two parts in this section. One part is prep and the other part is plating.
Okay.
So we're still in the prep kitchen right now. But when you're trolling the internet, one of the things you're looking for, you've already created a master file, but when people create their master file, they don't remember every good thing they've done. And when you start looking at job postings, you'll see a ton of things where you say, I've done that. And you need to pause and make sure you add them to your master file. With specifics, the same kind of a statement as the accomplishment statements that are already there, where you start with the most powerful verb, the results that you got from what you did, and then a little description about what it was that you did. So while you're doing this, your master file continues to grow and get even better.
Okay.
And of course, you're also seeing if there's anything that fits you. And one of the big things is in prep, if you were sitting in a restaurant, you wouldn't really want to sit there for a year waiting for dinner while people arrange things on the plate. I worked for a major hotel in San Francisco years ago, a long time ago. And we had an employee cafeteria where the chef decided that he wanted things to look right on the plate. So with his bare hands, he'd be moving things around on your plate while you waited. And at the time, it was so disgusting to me that I wrote my first poem, spelled Pome, because it really doesn't qualify as a poem. There once was a chef in a sailor hat. His face was just a little bit fat. He put his hands on my roast pork, and I stabbed him with my salad fork.
Why are you moving my stuff on my plate? Yeah.
So we don't want to get into a place with our prep here where we never get around to action. So while you're trolling the internet for job postings and you're discovering things you can add to the master file, if you spot a job posting that looks pretty good to you, don't spend another second on prep. Put something together and send it.
So just basically do it. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. Because I've known a lot of people who get so stuck on trying to make their resume perfect that they never get it sent anywhere. I've actually had paying clients who never served, so they have to pay me. And who 9 months, 10 months, never managed to send a single resume because it wasn't perfect yet.
Oh, geez.
And it didn't matter how many times I told them it only needs to be good enough to get you an interview. It never has to be perfect, just good enough to get an interview.
Yeah, you just basically need to get your foot in the door, really.
Yeah.
Because really the interview is your moneymaker. I mean, is your, what you're striving for.
Yeah, it's like the whole resume piece of it is you preparing your marketing documentation. The interview is just a call.
Interesting. Okay. So next section, make a copy of your master file with the name of the company you are sending the resume to in the file name. Sounds pretty simple.
Yeah, that might change because the company might want you to name it in some specific way when you send it to them. But while you're working on it, that'll be the best way for you to be able to keep track of what you've done in your own file.
Sure.
And the thing is, when you make that copy, you make sure always that anything you've done to your master file got saved, and it got saved to a backup copy somewhere. Because people have made the mistake of starting to delete things from their master file, and you never delete anything from the master file. It continues to grow forever.
Well, that's why it's called your master file, because it's pretty much everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you've made the copy, you want to be sure that you also have a backup and that both of them include whatever your latest work was. So it sounds simple, but it's one of the most critical steps because I've known people who screwed up their master file.
Oh, jeez. It's like, yeah, I'm gonna create my master file and then I'm gonna delete things out of it. It's like, no, you need your master file full so that you can pull from it. Because once you delete it, you're like, what was that?
And it really isn't pulling from it. It's more about once you've made that copy, you start deleting everything that doesn't fit the job you're applying for right now.
Oh, okay. So you have your master file, and then when you make a copy, your copy is you're only selecting the items out of the master file that go towards that job that you're looking for, right?
You're deleting anything that doesn't fit.
Sure.
And even if your master file is 100 pages, at some point you'll get down to 2 to 3 pages that are better than good enough for an interview. Because you've made sure that you've left all of the most relevant things in there.
Sure.
You carefully read the description of what they were looking for. You make sure that everything you have that fits their description is in there. And nothing that distracts them is in there. It's like when I was 15, I learned how to run a mimeograph machine. Nobody cares. It's in my master file. Because it was an accomplishment. I was 15 years old and I was doing something, operating a pretty big machine.
Sure.
It took up, it was like 10 feet long with all the tracks that came off of it and everything. So it was an accomplishment, but really nobody cares today.
It's like, wait, what was that? Yeah.
It's a little bit like someone who has an office and they have all their certificates and awards on the wall. Your master file is like that. It's there to remind you of all the good things you've done.
Sure. Yeah. But you don't use it for everything.
Right.
Right. So, okay. I think we talked about the next section, and let's see, the one after that is if you use a summary, shorten it to only what fits this objective. Is that kind of the same idea that you're talking about, or is it a little bit different?
In your master file, your summary might be half a page, And when you send out a resume, you only want it to be 5 or 6 lines, 7 at the most. So you're being really selective about what stays in there. For a lot of companies, one of the more important things might be that you speak more than one language. Another thing that's important in some jobs is how much you're willing to travel. And some of them, for instance, if someone's looking, if the most important thing to them is that you have a clearance and you have all kinds of other information in there about projects that you've done that don't relate to that company, you strip all of that out. What you leave is what they said they wanted to hear about.
Sure.
And of course, the summary is like the 30,000-foot view of you. It doesn't get into a lot of detail. And for me, every time I do a resume for a veteran, I start the summary with a Marine Corps veteran, an Air Force veteran, an Army veteran, a Navy veteran, a Coast Guard veteran with these kind of skills.
Okay.
Because there are a lot of companies that are not veteran friendly. You know, get it on the table immediately and don't give it another thought then. You know, if they don't like veterans, they'll get rid of it right then. If they do, they'll keep reading, and they'll probably read it in a more favorable light.
So
good luck for the non-vets. A lot of them don't even mention that they were ever in the military. And I think it's important for you to be proud of that and to only want to work with people who are proud of it.
Sure. Makes a lot of sense. I personally, when I interviewed for a few jobs after getting out, I wouldn't say I experienced people that didn't really appreciate being a veteran. It seemed like they did. It was just kind of part of the conversation was, I guess, awkward. You know, like you're trying to like translate. And I think this is where this would come into play. You know, from my if I had that at that point, that would probably have been come into play a little bit better for me, because translating military speak to civilian, you know, it really didn't go as well as I had hoped to. So I think a lot of the time, a lot of the interviews that I had were positive, but at the end of the interview, it seemed like, looking back at it now, it seemed like there could have been a better fit other than me because of how the conversation went. But
I many years ago, it used to be that when you interviewed for a job, you interviewed in the hiring manager's office. And you could tell when you went into the office what kind of vocabulary to use. Because most of the time, they were people who had still been subject to the draft. And most hiring managers were veterans. So when you went into an office, there might be a visible theme to what they had on their walls. And it might be one of two things. It might be military focused or it might be sports focused. So a smart interviewer would use that language. You know, then if they're talking about in military terms, they might use words like campaign. But if they're talking in sports terms, they might be talking about goals and touchdowns.
Sure. Yeah.
Hits, you know, that kind of language. And now it seems as if a lot of companies have tried to level the playing field by putting you in nondescript spaces where you can't guess anything about the interviewer.
Which seems kind of awkward. I mean,
it's horrible.
It's like
I went to a company and the HR woman brought me into a room that had bare walls and a giant pillar in one corner. that made no structural sense at all. It was this huge pillar with a window in the pillar. I thought, what the heck is that? And she sat off to the side, outside of my peripheral vision, on a chair with a notebook.
Oh, gosh.
And then the window opened, and it was a TV screen, but I couldn't see the person I was talking to. They could see me, but I couldn't see them. So I couldn't even respond to body language.
Yeah, that
zero advantage.
That sounds highly awkward.
Oh my gosh, it was horrible. It was like I was being interviewed by a robot.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that. Like, you wouldn't be able to, like, I mean, the body language is very, very important. You know, how somebody's sitting, how somebody's reacting, moving.
Yeah.
You know, facial expressions. That's my biggest thing, is facial expressions. Like, if you're in an interview and you see, you know, if you're in a room with somebody and say like they have a portrait or they have a picture or something like that, a family, and then you mention something about the picture, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, it's my family," and you see the reaction, you know, and you're like, okay, so I can connect with this person because, you know, I mentioned their family, I have a family, and all this sort of thing, you know. But if you're sitting in a room like that, it seems like, and I've been in several interviews as well, that you're just sitting in a room and it's like nondescript, you know, white walls, and it's just awkward.
Joy, can I ask, with everyone wearing masks now for COVID, how has that changed? Do you have anything? Can you speak to that at all?
You know, you still can tell when someone smiles. And you still can hear a smile in a person's voice. One of the things right now in the roadmap, we're still on pieces of paper and screens, so there's no human element to it. And that's the most difficult, is when you're just a piece of paper or a screen on a computer.
Sure.
It's better if you have a phone call. You know, then you have a voice to respond to. And then, of course, face-to-face is the optimal. So you're always at a disadvantage when it's just on paper. But even when you get on a telephone, even if you smile while you're on a telephone call, they can hear that on the other end. It changes how you sound.
I agree.
It doesn't have to be a real smile. It can be a fake smile.
Hey, I was thinking, yeah.
I often think that I might just draw a smile on my mask.
Yeah. I see that. I've seen that. Like, people just have their face or smiley faces on their mask.
Yeah, because you could just see the curve with the two little curves at the end.
Yeah. I know a lady that does that, but she's trying to talk to me, and I'm like, yeah. And she had a smiley face on her mask, and I'm like, that's cool. But I lot more to that one, but I didn't know who she was. And I mean, you know, it's a person that I've talked to a lot, and I didn't know who she was because she had this mask on, it's like covering her whole face. And then, but she had this smiley face. She's talking, she's like, "Hi," and I'm like, "Who are you?" Like, who are you? Well, but I mean, for me, it's with interview process and anything, any communication, you know, inflection, facial expressions, the overall movement of your body is very important. And you take one of those aspects out of that, it's very, very difficult. Because I actually personally, I read lips. So whenever I talk to somebody, not something that I say a lot, but apparently it's on the podcast now. It's great. But for me, in any conversation, let alone, you know, just normal communication, like in interviews and such. Not that I do interviews now, but is the looking straight at a person and seeing their facial expressions and, you know, how they move their face and all that. So I read it, you know, of course you read your lips and it's just like, okay, it's so much better. But Can't do that with masks. It's really tough for me. But anyways, I digress. So
we moved off into a different section for a while.
Yeah, we're going back. We're going back to create. So your last couple things on the create. Now that we're going back to the create custom resume. Yay! Thank you, Andy. That was great. A little extra information here. But create a custom resume. Last couple sections. I'm sure you have a story on this because you put it in here. Spell check and save the file. I'm sure when in anything in the military, when we say anything to anybody about like be safe, don't do that, or any advice, it's usually because somebody's done something wrong, and we want to not have somebody do that. So you say spell check and save the file. Is there a story behind that?
Yes. Well, when I first got into Silicon Valley kind of jobs, I had been in a reduction in force with a grocery store chain. And Silicon Valley, they only wanted to hire people who had already worked for Silicon Valley companies. And a grocery store chain, they wouldn't even talk to people like that usually. But I had a referral from an employee, and for some reason, the employee decided to make some changes to my resume. I was applying for a job as a tech writer. And when I got the interview, because company policy was that any employee referral would get an interview. But the manager that I met with was really unfriendly. And he said, I'm required to interview you because you're an employee referral. But I have to say, I can't think of a single reason to interview someone for the job of tech writer manager for us who can't spell properly. He said, you had typos in your resume. What kind of an example is that? And I thought, there were no typos in my resume because I do spell check. And I go back over things over and over again before it goes.
Sure.
And I thought, there was not a thing. And he showed me the resume, and I saw lines that I had not put in the resume. They had misspelled words and and typos. And I started to laugh, and I said, oh, I see my friend Fran decided to to enhance my resume.
Oh, no. Oh.
I did get that job.
Oh, okay.
But it had more to do with all the other interviews. It was hours of interviews with a whole series of people. And what cinched it was when I was talking to the most difficult, most introverted engineer that they had. And he mentioned something about the product. And I asked a question, and he got so excited by my question that he grabbed me by the hand and led me into the lab to show me how things worked. When his boss saw that, I had the job.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, I got it.
He didn't talk to anybody. And all of a sudden, here he is, all excited to show me stuff.
Interesting. So,
but if it hadn't been for that, I might not have gotten the job because the person who I interviewed with first was the top person.
Oh, okay. So what exactly? Okay, so did you end up talking to the person that reworked your resume for you?
Yes, I did. I said, thank you so much for trying to help me, but
it's like
it is so important for me to not have any misspelled words and typos in my resume.
Oh yeah, that's extremely important. I mean, there's a lot of elements, you know, in everything that we're looking at here, but you know, if somebody just looks at your resume, they're like, yeah, that's not something I want to look at. But
I had a woman I was helping at a job club, and I explained to her the next section about a cover letter. I told her what I wanted her to do with a cover letter. And she came in the next week really angry. And she said, "You told me to write a cover letter, and this is a racist country. I can't get a job here because I'm an Indian woman." And I went, "Well, it might be a racist company, but let me see what you sent them." And she threw her resume and her cover letter down in front of me, just so angry because we were not decent to people of color. And she was just ranting about it. What she had said in her cover letter was she had many years of experience souring vendors. Sourcing vendors is a good thing. Souring them is not.
Yeah, that sounds kind of odd.
And it was just a matter of leaving a single letter out that kind of set the tone for the person who received that.
Sure. Huh. Interesting. I mean, I guess we're going to talk about cover letter right now. We just jumped into it. So next section, everybody, let you know that is create a custom cover letter for each opportunity. So we'll go through this section, and then we'll finish off that for this episode. Okay, so next section would be using the same header that you use for your resume. So it has the look of stationery, and enter the date and contact information.
Yeah, and what you're trying to do, you're trying to show that you pay attention to detail and that you're consistent in the way you do things, that you have an appreciation for standards. All of that happens because everything you send or present in an interview has the same look. So the styles that you use in your resume, you just make a copy of the master file and delete all but a couple things like whatever style you used for your content and your headers.
Okay.
And so you kept your styles intact, and you use that for anything else you do. For example, the cover letter or a list of training. A list of training doesn't belong in a resume, but it's something that you might bring to an interview with you, and you want that to look the same. So that's just part of the whole package, is that every single thing you do has the same look.
Sure. That makes sense. So tell a little bit about the first paragraph. It says enter a first paragraph that says what you like about the company.
And this is probably one of the most important things that you do. A lot of companies don't read cover letters, they just toss them. But even at a glance, if your cover letter does what I'm about to talk about, there's a good chance that they'll read it. While you're doing all of your research and you're looking at these companies and figuring out what companies you actually want to work for, because you're not sending out 1,000 resumes and just seeing if anybody answers back. It's not a shotgun approach. You've actually selected the companies.
Sure.
So you've done some research on them, and you learned why you would like to work for that company. And that's what you're going to say in your first paragraph. That same company that I just talked about, I had looked up information about them, and one of the things I saw was that they had such a commitment to industry standards that they shared their source code with their competition. Not all of it, but a significant part in the interest of developing industry standards.
Wow.
That's a huge risk and a huge commitment.
Sure.
To do something like that. Now, I had been the standards and procedures coordinator at that grocery store chain, so I knew something about standards. So I was able to make my first paragraph, and this is where you're trying to make a connection right away. I was able to make the connection by saying that I had seen that article, and I understood what a commitment that was to industry standards, and that it was admirable. And that I believe my experience as a standards and procedures coordinator for a large company might contribute to their success.
Huh.
And the fact that I had taken the time to learn something about them mattered to them. And the fact that I was able to tie that information to something that I had to offer made an impression.
Oh yeah, because it shows that the importance, the connection point, to that
Yeah,
company.
it shows that you're not just looking for a job. It's not like, I just want a paycheck. No, you took the time to actually only look at companies that you like, that you respect and want to be part of. That it's the culture that attracted you.
Yeah, because I wouldn't think that you would have been the best, not the worst strategy. There we go. The worst strategy for getting a job is going for a job that you don't like. Like you're just blanking it out there and hoping to get a job. But I think any real culture in a company, you would want everybody wanting to be there, right? Team members, everything else. Yeah. Okay. So next section is, let's see. So if you are responding to a posting or an ad, posting or an ad that shows requirements, in the second paragraph, address each one and show how you fit in that requirement. That's actually pretty cool.
It's pretty simple, really. They say they want 7 years of this, and if you have 10 years of it, you don't say 10, you say more than 7 years of that. So you just go right down their list and match it as well as you can. If you can do it in the same sequence that they listed it, which may or may not have importance for them,
sure,
then you do it that way. But if you have things where you don't meet what they're asking, so if they've said they want 7 years of this and you have 5, drop that to the bottom of the list.
Okay.
Because what you want to do is you want them to fall in love with you before they find any weaknesses.
Before they can poke holes in you? Is that what you're saying? Yeah. Okay. So put the strong stuff first and then all the way down to the weakest stuff.
Well, ideally, you can match it all the way down the list in the sequence that they use.
Sure.
But if you have any weak spots, yes, they drop to the bottom.
Okay. Cool.
It's like going on a date. You're going to put your best foot forward. You're not going to say, "Oh, hi, I have issues with abandonment, so I get quite angry if somebody leaves the table while we're having dinner."
It's like that would be like date over. Like, no. Sorry, I'm going to go to the bathroom and then I'm going to find the door on my way out. So bye.
Yeah.
That's like I love, that's a good analogy. Everybody pay attention to that analogy. That was a really good one. Okay, so we went through the first paragraph, we went through requirements, and now we're up to final paragraph. So enter a final paragraph that, in your own words, says that you're looking forward to the opportunity to discuss the position or opportunities in more detail, and that you will call on a specified date.
Now, and see, that's the reason it says the position or opportunities is because if you're fishing and you're sending this resume to a company you would like to work for, but they have no openings, you don't have that second paragraph. You had nothing that you could match. So then you only have the first and final paragraph.
Oh, sure. Okay.
So in this one, you've made the connection in the first paragraph, and you've made as strong a connection as you could. And then in the final paragraph, whether you were able to show that you matched some requirements or whether you're just hoping they look at you and say, "This is somebody we'd like to add to our team." And in your own words,
sure,
you make sure that you have these elements in it, that you're looking forward to it, and that you'll call on a specified date. You don't need to say the exact time or anything, but just say, "I will call you on Wednesday the 17th."
Oh, okay.
And the reason for that is that when you make that call, if a gatekeeper says, "Are they expecting your call?" you can honestly say yes.
Yeah, because you've already prefaced, or I don't know, set them up for
You,
that. Hey,
yes,
yeah,
said you were going to call.
that's good. I like that. Instead of just calling randomly and be like, "Hey, can I talk to Bob?" And they're like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, Bob's not available right now." And you're like, "I really want to talk to him." We're like, "No, he's not available right now." And you're like, "Oh, did you tell him?" And you're like, "No, I didn't say anything." Okay, well, I can't direct you to him. Sorry. Yeah, no, I understand that. I like that. You tell somebody, "Hey, by the way, I'm going to follow up."
Mm-hmm.
If you don't follow up, you're just a douchebag. But other than that,
Right.
okay. So last few sections here. End with respectfully or sincerely, and add your name. And then if you're snail mail, leave 3 lines before your name for the signature. So as with always, I'm sure there's probably a story with the respectfully and sincerely. Do people like actually put something different there that doesn't denote respectful?
Well, sometimes people get a little too effusive,
Mm,
and they'll have a whole sentence before they sign off, or they'll just get too flowery.
yeah.
And respectfully and sincerely are nice business terms. It sometimes I realized with my grandson that not everyone learns how to write a business letter, or address an envelope in school.
I
He
agree.
sold a car for me before the campfire. He sold a car for me up in Paradise. Unfortunately for the guy who bought it, it burned in the fire. But
Oh,
when he sold it for me, he said, "So how do I send you the money?" And I said, "Well, just send me a check."
oh no.
And he had no idea how to mail something.
Interesting.
I had to send him. I put a picture, made a picture in a Word document of where you put things on an envelope. The stamp, the return address, the mailing address. And I thought, really? I mean, we learned this in school, but they don't teach it now. And people don't snail mail a lot, they email.
Right. No, exactly.
And they don't think about leaving space for a signature, because you don't usually sign an email, although there are some documents online that you can sign.
Yeah, but they don't think to give enough space to be able to do that.
Yeah. So it's a funny thing. It seems like a funny thing to have to say something like that. But I was at one company where I was writing instructions for all of the different employees. They would hire receptionists, and the receptionist might be there for a day, 3 days, a week, a month, however long. So I wrote the instructions for the receptionist, and when the manager looked at the instructions for the receptionist, they said, "Is this really necessary? This amount of detail seems ridiculous. I mean, really, why do you care how they put the paper in the file cabinet?" And I said, "Well, if you think about it, we've had all these different people in here, and half of them put the papers in the filing cabinet with the staple side down. And then they keep on adding and adding until the drawer won't close because nothing is going to the bottom of the file folders.
Oh.
And you just had a file cabinet fall on one of your employees."
Oh. Oh.
And just a stupid little thing about where you put the staple in a set of papers and how you put it into the file folder.
That makes a lot of sense, and it's a visual thing now for me, because I'm like, so put the file. Okay, so staples up. Otherwise, your filing cabinet's gonna fall on you. Okay. Interesting. Okay. I always like those visual stories. That's cool. Okay, so
And of course, we finish with spell check and save the file again.
yeah, that's what I was
And
gonna say.
save the file again as a PDF. That's important because you don't want your format to be broken.
So is that it kind of goes with if somebody kind of like with what happened with you is they reorganized your resume?
Yes.
Yeah. So you put it in PDF that way. There's no opportunity for someone to rewrite.
Well, if they have PDF, they could, but if they have Adobe, they could. But and the main reason is not to break your formats. One of the mistakes that people make is they do all of this documentation in normal style and just tweak it all the way through. It can go into someone else's system and get converted back to normal.
Oh, okay. So
you lose your bolding, you lose, if you decided to capitalize something, you can lose that. You can lose your spacing. You can lose a whole lot if that happens. So the PDF keeps that from happening. When I do a resume, I set up specific styles for that resume with names that they're not going to run into in someone else's system.
Sure.
So like for you, it might be RS-content, RS-heading, RS-title. All these different terms, and then it can't get broken. But damage can still happen if you send a PDF. And also, a lot of companies won't open a Word file. They'll insist on a PDF.
Is there a reason behind that?
A PDF is supposed to be less likely to infect someone's system.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I figured it was probably that. Huh. Interesting. Okay. Well, we've gotten through 2 of the sections on here, which is great. So for everybody that's listening or just jumped in, right in the middle. So we went through create a custom resume for each opportunity, and then we finish off with create a custom letter for each opportunity. So that's awesome. So I think what we're going to do is we'll do the next episode. We'll be there's a section. The next section is deliver packet by email or snail mail or fax. I love fax. And whatever works. So, and then we'll get into creating your portfolio. So Joy, it has been awesome having you on the episode again. And then we can get through this job search roadmap to help people to get a really qualified job for them and their skills. So
it's always fun, Ryan.
Well, thank you, Joy, for joining. And then we will look forward to the next episode. So everybody, thank you for watching and listening. As always, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. Get it out there as wide as possible. So thank you again, Joy, and have a great day, everybody.
And go and visit battlebox.co.
Visit battlebox.co, not .com, it's .co. Thank you, everybody.